Engaging citizens.
A game changer for development?
Context and enabling environment with Helene Grandvolnier, Lead Social Development Specialist, Governance Global Practice, World Bank Group.
We have now looked at the history and definition of citizen engagement and explored some of the theories and concepts that underlie citizen engagement, such as accountability, responsiveness, and the feedback loop. We have also touched upon some of the mechanisms of citizen engagement, from elections at its most basic, to other forms of engagement such as community monitoring, social audits, and participatory budgeting. You will find a list of these mechanisms in the core readings for this week. This should give you a sense of the broad range of initiatives we are referring to when we talk about citizen engagement. In this talk, we will be exploring the critical role of context and examining the conditions that provide an enabling environment for citizen engagement to work. First and foremost, it's important to underline that citizen engagement is not a technical process that can be replicated independently of context. In a nutshell, where citizen engagement is effective in reaching its goals, it's because particular forms of citizen engagement interact in positive ways with existing institutions and processes of governance and within the broader socio-political context. No wonder then that seemingly similar approaches in different contexts often yield different outcomes. Context does matter. But merely acknowledging this is not particularly helpful. What you need is a way to systematically analyze context to identify entry point and strategic ways to support more effective citizen engagement. I will present this framework in 3 steps. First, I will show how we define citizen engagement as the interplay of 5 constitutive elements: citizen action and state action, and civic mobilization, information, and interface. Second, I will review the socio-political factors that have the greatest bearing on the form and effectiveness of citizen engagement processes. And third, I will present a framework with drivers for each of the 5 constitutive elements of citizen engagement that can be assessed for a particular issue, for instance, teacher absenteeism, and which takes into account socio-political factors. Now, you may have noticed that the core readings from both myself and Jonathan Fox refer to the concept of social accountability. Social accountability can be defined as the extent and capability of citizens to hold the state accountable and make it responsive to their needs. Although the emphasis on accountability makes the term social accountability distinct from citizen engagement, the 2 terms share enough in common to be considered for the purpose of this course as interchangeable. Because of this, both Jonathan and I will use the term citizen engagement in our talks. First, we'll turn to how we can consider citizen engagement as the interplay of 5 constitutive elements. Before we start, let's look at a simple way to depict a typical citizen engagement process. One provides information, which triggers citizen action, which in turn triggers state response. Reality is more complex. Here, we depict citizen engagement as the interplay of 5 elements, namely citizen action, state action, but also civic mobilization, the citizen-state interface, and information. So why do we do this? And what are the main messages here? First, we must recognize that both citizen and state actions are fundamental to citizen engagement. The role of the state is crucial, as it provides or hinders the enabling environment for information and association. It offers diverse avenues for accountability, political accountability, administrative accountability, and can also actively support and even initiate citizen engagement approaches. As importantly, its level and capacity to respond to citizen demands will determine the outcomes of citizen engagement initiatives. Citizen engagement is not the state against citizens or citizens against the state. Many citizen engagement approaches focus on building supportive pro-accountability networks across state and society. Yet the figure shows the state above the citizens. This represents the power imbalance at play between state officials and citizens. This is important, as power relations are at the core of citizen engagement processes and even more significant for marginalized citizens. Second, as we have seen, information is a crucial ingredient for citizen engagement. However, in most cases, it also needs to be accompanied by civic mobilization and an interface between state and citizens to yield action and concrete outcomes. Civic mobilization is most often facilitated by intermediaries, such as non-governmental organizations, to spur citizens into action and support their demands vis-à-vis the state. But state officials also need to be mobilized. Therefore, an interface is necessary to allow both citizens and state actors, or coalitions that cut across these two types of actors, to interact. Third, there is no generic linear sequence among these 5 elements. Information may be made available by state action or through civic mobilization, and may be generated or exposed by citizen action. Additionally, mobilization may be spurred by information or precede it, and creation of the interface may be the starting point or the end point of the intervention. Fourth, the nature of the element itself matters. For instance, the content of information, how it is communicated, and by whom are all important. Fifth, neither the state nor citizens are homogeneous or exclusive categories. Incentives differ, for instance, for elected or non-elected officials, elite or non-elite, and civil society groups can represent public interest or narrower special interests. Lastly, because citizen engagement processes are iterative, citizen engagement approaches will generally be required to dynamically reassess entry points and trajectories, support building blocks for future citizen engagement intervention, and carefully assess risks and trade-offs. Now that we have outlined a more detailed and complex view of the process of citizen engagement, let's review the socio-political factors that influence the effectiveness of citizen engagement processes. Citizen engagement is shaped by the nature and interaction of political and civil society, both between state and society and within society. Cultural norms, global factors, and the prevailing political settlement also matter. Let's take a closer look at why these socio-political factors are so important, starting with political society. The nature of the state, that is, the actors and dynamics within the political society, are as important, if not more so, than civil society in explaining the effectiveness of citizen engagement. The two most important factors here are the commitment and capacity of bureaucrats and elected officials to promote and respond to citizen demands, and the nature of the rule of law. Another socio-political factor is the state-society relationship. To make accountability claims, there must be an assumption about the responsibilities of the state, as well as the entitlements of citizens. Hence, the nature of the existing social contract, as well as the history of state-society relations, shapes citizen engagement mechanisms and outcomes. The state of civil society is yet another important socio-political factor. Simply put, the technical capacity, networking ability, and legitimacy of civil society organizations are fundamental for citizen engagement to be effective. Cultural factors matter as well. For instance, accountability is understood differently depending on the prevailing norms. Furthermore, global factors, including international initiatives such as the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative and the role of international donors, also influence the effectiveness of citizen engagement. Now that we have reviewed the socio-political contextual factors that influence the effectiveness of citizen engagement, we propose a framework that can help assess the likelihood of citizen engagement being effective in a given context and for a particular issue. This framework identifies the drivers of the 5 constitutive elements that we mentioned in the first section, while also taking into account the key socio-political factors highlighted in the previous section. For each of the drivers, some key questions to help you test it will pop up on screen. Let's start with citizen action. The driver of citizen action include awareness and salience of the issue to citizens, intrinsic motivation, efficacy, capacity for collective action, and cost of inaction. The drivers of state action include awareness, ability to resolve the issue, official attitude toward engaging with civil society demands, intrinsic motivation, and cost of inaction. Here, we should note that the cost of inaction often differ for elected and non-elected officials who respond to different incentives. The drivers of information are accessibility, framing of the information, and trustworthiness. The drivers of interface include awareness, credibility, mediation, and capability. The drivers of civic mobilization include awareness, capability, and networks and credibility. In conclusion, there are no universal best practices for citizen engagement. Context is critical, and accordingly, citizen engagement approaches need to be tailor-made. The framework we have proposed does not provide simple answers on when and how citizen engagement leads to outcomes, but it does shine a light into the black box of context, thus providing you with a systematic way to assess a given context in order to design, implement, and monitor citizen engagement programs most effectively. In the next video, Professor Jonathan Fox will show how strategic engagement, as opposed to tactical engagement, yields more consistent and sustainable outcomes. Thank you.